believes in punching up, not down. This is the Situation Room.
At a few minutes after 9 o'clock, 7 minutes past 9, and welcome to all audiences across, and welcome to our audience on KTN News as well this hour, getting into the conversation. So a couple of things have happened. Just when you think that there are not enough hits, 1, 2, then fuel prices come and knock you off your rocker, and then you're given some news of other things happening. It's unfortunate that we have so many difficult conversations to have, but it's important to have them so that we see where is the country going, where are people going, what's happening with development. And we're going to be having another such conversation in this hour, and our guest for that is seated. Leonard Budachi has been here before. He's not a stranger to the Situation Room, but another hot topic coming from the hot seat. Leonard, good morning.
Good morning to you, Ndu.
Companies are folding. We have a long list of those companies that are folding.
They are. Tough times,
and there's been some madness. And so we're going to look into the whys, and as CT would say, the where to fours of all of this, and see exactly what the issue is.
Indeed.
And small businesses, big businesses, medium-sized businesses, everybody's affected, and something is causing that, and we want to find out why. Leonard Mudachi is the chairman of the Retail Traders Association of Kenya, and you speak today in that capacity. So before we get into it and then cry for me, my beloved country, CT will welcome us to today's proverb from Malawi.
A piece of incense may be as large as the knee, but unless burnt, emits no fragrance.
Wow.
Leonard, what do you think about that? What does that mean to you?
I think for me, I'll take it from the perspective of it's more quality rather than quantity, in the sense that it's not how much you do, but how effective you are in what you do. You may do a little and have great impact, and you may do a lot. And I think the log in this case, fragrance log that has no smell, is an example of doing a lot and not having an impact really. And you maybe have a small piece of sandalwood and you burn it, and it has great fragrance and impact in the room if you're trying to get a good smell in a room.
City is impressed by your fragrance knowledge. He stopped at sandalwood.
Yeah, by the time someone gets to sandalwood, as you would say, touche.
Touche, what I mean. Wow, I'm impressed too. Wow, okay, so I didn't see it going that way, but all right, we'll take it. So I'm just looking at some headlines, Leonard, as we get into this conversation. Looking at some headlines, and they've made their way, and it didn't start in September 2023. We saw from a year ago where the big financial firms around the world started to give, warning signals, and they said there's something going on here. And we started to see indications that businesses in this part of the world were then starting to shut down. Of course, we know the COVID effect. There was the COVID effect, and we knew that because of the type of certain businesses, they had to shut down immediately because, there was no congregation of persons. Things like that did not take place. But what we are seeing now is something more. It's a little bit more than because a global phenomenon has asked you to stop doing business. But there's something else that's going on. And we've seen the folding of very many firms in Kenya. There's a list even that has come out. There was a list that came out last year. And I guess the overarching question right now is, what on earth is going on?
You're right in saying that this started globally. I don't think we're isolated. I think we have, if we're to look at the last 3 to 4 years, they have been events of a lifetime. And but let's go back a bit and interrogate capital. Or where does money come from for businesses? And maybe we can start with the states, which in Kenya, a lot of the companies that we have seen close down have been fintechs, or e-commerce firms. And we can trace that back to where money comes from. So there was a season in the States where let's look at money as a commodity, and it is in a lot of in most cases. There was very cheap money available in the States. So if you understand how private equity works or venture capital, they don't have their own money. They get their money from pension funds or other large holders of capital who give them money to go ahead and invest in this money, in these various businesses.
Right.
Now, that is fine when they have nowhere else to put that money and make a healthy return. So let's just, for conversation's sake, take an example and say, okay, I'm a large pension fund from the States. Let's say the police department pension fund, and I have X billion dollars, and I give it to Fund X to manage, and Fund X tells me we'll give you a return of 7%. Yeah. I'm like, okay. At that time, when there was cheap money in the States, the market or the US treasuries were giving what, 0.5 or 1%. So you look at that 7 and you look at that 1, and you're like, okay, this one is higher risk, but I'll take it because it gives me a greater return. So we had a decade or so where a lot of companies came up with a model where sustainability and profitability was not the initial goal. That the goal was scale. Now that's great because there was cheap money. So people are saying, fine, show us that you're continuing to grow even before you're profitable. We are fine with that because we can see the growth. And then things changed, or the rug was pulled from under them. And you now see, I think today the US Treasury bills are sitting at maybe 7, if not 8%.
8%, yeah.
Now, when you look at it from that perspective, I have the same pension funds. Why would I put my money in high risk PE or venture capital at the expense of, and there's treasury bills, which is very low risk money. I'll just put my money there and get my 8%. Now, why does that come back to that should affect the States? And we saw everyone, we saw Google, we saw Facebook, we saw everyone laying off people. So why did it come to affect us? Now we come to, where does the money that was funding the fintechs come from? It comes from the very PEs, private equity firms and venture capitalists that were getting that cheap money in the States. So overnight, you had companies which had been told, grow, says, oh, we're not yet profitable. It's okay, grow. We want you to have a larger footprint, spread yourself, go. And overnight, it's like, where's the profitability? And because he who pays the piper
calls the
tune. So they come and that is a dramatic, it may not be the only reason, but it is a big reason. So companies who had gone, you hear them talk about Series A, Series B, companies who are in funding rounds found the funding market a bit dire, in comparison to previous years, when they would go and set their targets for fundraising, which were informed by their business plans, and they would then go out and get their money.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but let's look at, there was a case that has been made, or rather put out, for these Kenyan 8 firms and a 9th one on the way, who for some reason still folded even with this huge funding that they had been given. We're talking about 35 billion shillings across 8 of them. Are we looking at them folding? And when we talk about folding, they've closed shop. Everything shut down. We're done. Right? They received this money. So are you saying that in the blink of an eye, where the money came from, there is an ask as per profitability? We've given you this money, show us what you're doing with it, and with an inability to produce profit or to at least give an explanation why, what are we saying happened? That this money was pulled out?
No, we're saying that there was a shift in the needs and wants of the funder. So the funder originally was chasing growth. And the business plans for those businesses were built around growth. And you are told, go and grow. Yeah. And growth and profitability are not the same thing.
No.
You can say, okay, let's take an example of Uber. You know, Uber is, I'm not up to date for this year, but is not a profitable company. Yeah. But they have a system that is growth based. Says, we'll build a footprint, yeah, go into as many countries as you can. Eventually, when you own the ecosystem or you have grown to a certain level, the profitability will come. Yeah. So a lot of that happened in Kenya. It was like, we'll make money on scale. So the first priority is not growth. If you're to prioritize the list, let's say we're saying profitability, and then after profitability, scale. But this one was flipped, and we're told, okay, first we want you to grow. So you had companies which are maybe, let's say, Nairobi based only, yeah, and were earmarked to go to maybe to be profitable in the next 6 months, yeah. But in the 6 months, you're told, no, go to Mombasa. And you go to Mombasa, you're not yet making money in Nairobi. So now you have Nairobi expenses plus Mombasa expenses. And when you start to gain a foothold in Mombasa, you're told, oh, let's go to Nakuru, so that we can show our potential funders in the future that we are big, you know, because let's also not forget that we're a relatively small market as Kenya. So to show the kind of scale that the global funders would be interested in, you have to be small by their standard is probably medium by ours. Yeah. So they want you to scale to a level where you say, this is the potential we're showing you. So look, give us money because we're already on this path. Look what we did in Nairobi. Look what we did in Mombasa. Look what we're doing in Nakuru. So give us money to cover the whole of Kenya. Yeah. Now imagine if that's you and you're running that business. So you have staff to go to Mombasa, to Nakuru. You have staff to push this growth model. Yeah. And overnight it changes to you need to be making money. So what are you going to do? You're either going to start cutting back. Unfortunately, we had some that tried their level best but ended up cutting back completely, which is shutting down. But you also have many others who just shut down markets and say, okay, we are closing down this market, we're closing down this market, and we're remaining with this, all in an attempt to get that profitability. And so it's an overnight, not an overnight, but it's a shift in strategy resulting from a change in
the funding environment,
in what the funder wants. Yeah. And the funder, and maybe that's where we should segue into that and say, okay, can we have more local funders, you know, so that some of these decisions are more local?
Do we have
I think we do.
Do we have a culture that encourages the very thing that you're saying?
I think we need it to emerge. We need it to emerge because we can't continue. A lot has changed, you know. We used to dial rotary phones, you know, and now we are comfortable with phones in our hands and we use them as we go. So I think we can change. And I feel that our potential funders, if we are to borrow from the other markets, there are a lot of interesting things happening in the market, and we hope that they'll continue and grow. But we need our capital, our local capital.
Is that not what a lot of these funders that we're talking about today? Because as you said, a lot of the funding then is US, it's stateside. It comes from some European countries, but they can be investors because the original base of their capital was from profits that they made while being emerged in their local markets. So there are two things here. You talked about the fact that why we have to, as local businesses, as Kenyan businesses or African businesses in other countries, why we have to secure this foreign funding or this external funding is because it's going to take time for your local consumer to rack up enough for you that you can use now as exchange for your business. That there's not enough for you to buy and sell or to use services, or that the culture of promoting such businesses has not gotten to the point where businesses can remain afloat without funding, right?
Okay.
Is that what we're saying? But if you look at these funders who are external, the truth of the matter is that they built up their base of capital because of the fact that there was that exchange at a local level, that people within their communities were buying their goods and commodities, they were exploring their services, and that's how they were able to have a surplus. Because you're not funding anybody if you don't have a surplus. Is that not the truth? You're not investing in something. You're not taking a loan to invest for somebody else.
Fair enough, but I think we need to explore who the funder is.
Right.
And a lot of the funders or the large capital holders are not necessarily corporate entities. They may not be for profit. In fact, in a lot of cases, they are not for profit. They may be funds that are set up specifically to manage that. But where are these funds getting their money from?
Exactly.
Maybe pension funds. We in Kenya have a phenomenal pension environment. Yeah, if you're to look at look at the Nairobi skyscraper landscape. You know, when now you get very nice silhouettes of Nairobi, and just count how many of them. Do your research and find out how many of them are owned by local pension funds. Yeah, our pension funds do have. Last time I checked, in the region of maybe $12 to $13 billion of funds under management. So this is a lot of money that we're talking about. And what I'm saying is that not that we do not want the foreign funds, but I think as locals, we also need to look at other ways that we can get involved in funding local entities for two reasons. Reason number one is, of course, what we said. You understand the local market better, and you understand its shocks and ebbs and flows better.
And you as an investor would not be making a demand on whomever you gave. If we're talking about local funds, pooling of resources here, because you understand the market, what we're saying is that there would not be a demand on your grantee or fundee, whatever that is, the benefactor of these funds. You would not be making demands on them for growth immediately because you understand what the market is like. Is that what we're saying?
You would be making more locally contextual demands because you would have a better understanding of the local market. You would not be trying to turn Kenya into a microcosm of what, for example, Silicon Valley is doing, or push growth metrics that are not in line with that. Because we take for granted that our ecosystem is also emerging. There's a lot of learning that's going on, and we are getting better at this than we were in the past. And that brings me to the other big issue, I think, is local context. I think we need to have the conversation about how do local founders attract capital. It's not always the case. And sometimes you do have some examples of entities which come into the market. Nothing against foreign direct investment, but I think we have not been good at valuing local intellect. And local intellect has value. You do have some concepts. Actually, one of the companies that is mentioned on that list is in the food space, which I'm in. And when they got the funding that they got, a lot of us local players were like, what? How? And you don't want to pour cold water on someone's idea, particularly because they've gotten funding, but you have to question who gave you money on the concept and that if you apply local norms and local nuances to it, does not hold water, for simple facts. So I think local context is a big thing, and it does have a value, and it should be valued. And I think local players, even the international players who come in and fund, need to place a greater premium on local context and understanding on local nuances. I mean, we had a famed Kenyan telco CEO who said, what about Kenyans and their peculiar habits? Those peculiar habits are local context. And when you tell me that you're going to do this in this way, I may tell you something very small, but that, what I'm telling you, has value and could mean success or failure of the venture.
But I would have assumed, again, I shouldn't, but I would have assumed that people who have money to invest would be people who will go out of their way, go to great lengths to ensure that due diligence is done before they put their money. And I would assume that this local context and then content that you speak of would be one of their considerations.
Agreed. But I like to use this example because it's a good example. Yeah. Go and look in LinkedIn, yeah, which is now your primary source of looking at talent, you know, or experience, and look for Africa expert. Yeah. And then on the same note, go and look for European or American or Asian expert. You know, chances are you'll not see many, even though we have Kenyans in the diaspora who've been there for 30, 40 years, or maybe even longer, and a lot of other Africans. You'll not see themselves touting themselves as European experts on their CVs, and that be a foundation for getting funding, you know. But you see a whole load of African experts, and are they really? I think we're getting to a point. We're getting to a point in the local market where we are owning our narrative better. And as a result,
or at the very basic minimum, owning our narrative.
We're owning our narrative, yeah. And so that needs to translate into the whole capital discussion. Yeah.
You know, the question about funding and business, look at the prevailing social ecosystem that these funds come from. Look at how it is they understand money. Look at how it is they understand the application of it, and look at how it is they understand the growth of it. And the willingness to actually venture, the willingness to actually be entrepreneurs in the real sense of the word and to take risks. Our environment here, I see a lot of risk averse, very, very risk averse people. Because if I look, for instance, at the banking sector, and who you're going to say my favorite topic,
of course,
yes, it is my favorite topic, is they are so risk averse that if you use the word growth and the word entrepreneurship in the same sentence with many of our local banks, what you'll be trying to prove are complete opposites, because one doesn't quite support anything that they may refer to as partnership is something that is absolutely removed of any possible known risk. And unfortunately, in business, you can't do that. You'll go up to a certain point. And then you talk about the monies that we have in the pension sphere. It is a ton of money. But who benefits from it?
So you raise a very interesting topic in the sense that where is our money invested?
Yes.
And who? So yes, there is a risk aversion. And you see something like real estate in Kenya is something that people love.
They do.
So people love land. I'm going to buy a quarter. I'm going to buy an eighth. And I'm not here to chastise that. It's great. Many can show a healthy return that they have made for that. But I'm saying that there are other forms of investment. And it's also good to see that, for example, we have a very vibrant stock exchange. Yeah. And at Retrack, we had a meeting with the NSC, and we had conversations around the new things they are looking at in terms of how to raise capital. And it's exciting to see those conversations being had. But you talked about entrepreneurship and failure. I think if I'm to bring back this conversation about local context, yes, there's risk. And yes, our financiers, mainly our commercial banks, tend to be very risk averse. Yeah, but I think again we still fail to place the value on that knowledge. If I'm to invest in the business, I'd rather find someone who's tried and failed once or twice,
right?
Because I know what he has learned is priceless. And you cannot teach those lessons in a classroom. The pain, the emotional turmoil of going through that, and what he knows. But I also feel that one of the challenges a lot of local entrepreneurs face is adequate capital. You don't get people with the ability, given the ability or the chance to execute without the constraints of capital. So you find that a lot of businesses bootstrap, or in capital raising speak, bootstrapping is basically running your company on the bare minimum until you get it to stand up on a shoestring budget.
Yeah.
But you find a lot of companies in Kenya, or a lot of younger entrepreneurs, being forced to bootstrap for way longer than is normal.
It's normal. I'd like us to look into that a little bit more, because interestingly enough, on this list, and those who were spoken to and said a little bit of something, talked about that very same issue. So when there's the funding aspect, there's the funding factor, but there's also the fact that the environment was proving quite difficult. Access to capital, the business environment was then difficult to navigate through. And let's look at those when we talk about local solutions. We'll do that when we come back from this break. And it's at this point that we talk about something special happening on October 29th. It's Kenya's largest single-day athletics event. It takes place, it's back for the 20th edition of the Standard Chartered Nairobi Marathon. Where will you be?